My name is Tal Zimerman. I am the subject of a documentary film called Why Horror. The film explores the reasons why human beings just can't get enough of being scared. We love it. We shouldn't love it. There doesn't appear to be too many benefits, or are there? It's a weird thing. It goes back in humanity since before we could use words. We were scratching stuff on cave walls, monsters and battles and all kinds of epic stuff that sort of really, we see a parallel in modern horror, and I think my theory always has been that it's an essential part of the human condition, and so we made a movie about it. To my right is one of the co-directors, Nicolas Kleiman.
Hello.
Please make him feel Fan Expo welcome. And to my left is a real legitimate sociologist. Her name is Andrea Subissati. I'm not kidding, she actually went to school for that. Apparently that's what it takes these days. And she appears in the film too, lending her expertise. And bolting through that door any minute will be Rue Morgue editor Dave Alexander, who also appears in the film and has a lot to say on the subject, because it's a fascinating subject, wouldn't you agree? Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch some clips from the movie. It's a little rough still. We're still tweaking.
We are literally mixing right now. I ran away from the mixing room for this, and then I'm going back. He's doing voiceover right now. So
we're lucky that we're working across the street at the CDC, where we have a load of studio space. So yeah, I literally came from a recording booth straight here, butted in front of people in line. They got upset with me, but you know, because there's the convention ethics code. Apparently I violated it, and I'm going to go to convention jail pretty soon. So with all that said, we're going to show some clips, and we're going to discuss some of the concepts found within. So without further ado, here is the introduction to our film.
Horror is a global phenomenon, a growing culture. Millions of people love it, and yet horror fans are often misunderstood.
Horror films help tap into pleasures that we're actually not supposed to have.
It's a safe fright, and I think that enables you to sort of relish it, to sort of enjoy it, or look into yourself and say, why am I afraid of this?
Dark and disturbing imagery has always been an important part of our culture. But why? Why do we love to be scared? My name is Tal Zimerman. I'm a journalist, an actor.
Hey man, you know what time it is? Time for me to punch you in the ribs.
A collector. I even lecture at conventions and festivals. Horror isn't a hobby for me, it's a lifestyle. But lately I've been wondering, isn't this stuff supposed to repulse me? I'm going to uncover the culture of fear. I want to know. Why horror?
Looking cross-culturally at horror, you can see a lot of indications of what different cultures fear, what bothers them, even their belief systems on how they approach life and death.
Is it more mentally sound to, watch fiction about monsters and blood and atrocity and gore, or to watch real-life news footage of actual people dying and getting killed?
Horror kind of provides a forum for people to talk about things like gender and morality and spirituality and sexuality without getting their backs up.
It is a horrible, hauntingly accurate vision of the mindless excesses of a society gone mad.
Well, the best horror films are ones which I feel have a deeper level to them, where they're actually more of a critique and examination of the social situations around us.
But now, we're not only watching horror, we're part of it. We've evolved from passive consumers to active participants.
Why is the zombie the heavyweight champ? I think it's video games.
Certainly, video games now have a great influence on how kids might react when they can walk around as a single-person shooter and just blow the hell out of people left and right.
Should I be worried that I love horror so much? Can my obsession cause negative psychological damage?
people who are psychopaths or sociopaths who are more dangerous, the most dangerous, you can't reach them through a movie experience. Movies are for sane people.
Nowadays, we don't kill people for fun. We make movies where people die for fun. And as much as anybody could say that horror films are unhealthy, historically, that is a progression in the right direction.
Do we need it? Probably not, but I wouldn't want to live in a culture without it.
Would you say, Andrea, as a fan of the genre yourself, and a scholar of the genre, is it really more popular now than it has been in a long time?
I'm going to say yes. I don't really have evidence to back that up, but just sociologically speaking, the advent of the internet really changed everything for fandom of every sort. You know, I can remember a time where I was the only horror fan in my circle of friends, and that kind of kept my horror reach pretty small. I was limited to what I could get at the video store. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Alexander.
Dave's here.
Sorry for being late, crazy traffic and all that stuff. And I'm going to apologize in advance because I got to leave early because there's another panel I'm supposed to be at right after this one. So, sorry guys.
So yeah, so the question is horror now bigger than it's ever been?
Yeah, and I would say definitely so. That fans are able to connect a lot more easily. Filmmakers are able to connect with fans a lot more easily, and vice versa. Fans are having input on what films are getting made, and social media is playing a huge role in that. So I think it's bigger than ever, and it's a really exciting time to be a horror fan.
Dave, what do you think? Horror bigger now than it's ever been?
Yeah, I would say it's tied directly to the internet, actually. You can just see everything growing, and it's because the communities have come together. The content's available through YouTube or file sharing or just being able to buy from small companies. And it's created this inflation, crazy inflation. It's not just horror, of course, you see it with everything here. At the magazine, every year there's more film festivals, there's more horror conventions. It's pretty unstoppable right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a bubble that's going to burst, or if it's going to level out, or if it's going to have slow growth, and every city's going to have its own horror fest. I don't know how many cities like Ken Foray and Tony Todd can travel to, but I'm sure they'll try.
Growing up, you know, you could always rope a buddy into watching a horror movie with you, or I have 3 younger brothers and I subjected them to all kinds of shit, from like makeup effects and on, but it was never really, you don't go do the horror thing, you know, you go, you rent the movie, and maybe you buy like a horror magazine and you read it by yourself, but there's no community necessarily to speak of. And in the early 2000s, I discovered this magazine called Rue Morgue putting on their movie nights, and I just saw a room full of people who loved horror, and I'd never seen that before. I might have gone to a horror movie and saw people who might drift in and out of horror movies, but I never saw a concentrated community happening. And it was amazing. It was a real eye-opener. It kind of got me back into horror. You know, it was in the 90s, there wasn't a ton of, you know, horror was kind of a dirty word. Blockbuster erased the horror section, and all the horror titles or titles that might have fit in the horror section were now under the action section or the science fiction section. When Scream came out on the poster, a new thriller by Wes Craven. You couldn't, like, you know, Silence of the Lambs. It's a movie about a cannibal who skins people and wears their thing, but it's a thriller. You know, it was kind of dirty. So between the internet and sort of the younger generation who grew up watching the same stuff that I did from the 70s and 80s, started making their own movies, and they went hardcore with it. I'm talking like, you know, Alex Adjo with High Tension, and Eli Roth, and the Saw movies that came out in the early 2000s and stuff like that. Things kind of like, horror became horror again, and with that, a community sprung up. And from there, it's grown. So horror has always been popular. The first movies were horror movies. I mean, the old Georges Méliès movies where, you know, the Haunted Mansion and even A Trip to the Moon made people faint in the theater because what they were seeing was so otherworldly. So it's always been big. It's always had a presence. But tens of thousands of zombies in the street popular? No, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. So we were primed to ask these questions. Why do we do this? Why do we get so involved in this? Why is it growing in popularity, not just within our cities, but places abroad? And we saw for ourselves as we traveled around the world, this increasing popularity of the horror genre.
Now, let me ask you, what would you say? Because people mention that, there's that jump. There's super fans like you you grew up watching horror.
Yeah.
And then there's the people that watch The Walking Dead.
Right.
And I guess the question would be, number one, how do you see them?
Mm-hmm.
And number two, like, what do you think generated that? Because the internet helped a lot with you connecting with other people, that are super fans and sharing this experience. But people like The Walking Dead, they are not coming from there.
Right. Well, I mean, we all got to start somewhere, right? We all get into this, like on our own terms. That's the really great thing about it, is that there are no rules for being the ultimate horror fan. If anybody tells you they are for sure a dick, for sure. And so how did something as gnarly as The Walking Dead become something that people talk about over the water cooler conversation? How did this might sound controversial, but I think, again, it's the internet. I think since various conflicts in the world, that we're able to see things in real time now, I think people are subjected to a lot more gruesome stuff than they've ever been in the real world. And I think because of that, they go to horror to sort of reclaim almost like a feeling of control in a way. Because when you see all this stuff, if you know all the bad stuff that's happening in the world, and I mean, like, if you know all of it, you almost can't function. Like, it's too much to take. So you got to put that energy somewhere. And the horror genre is absolutely the perfect place for that.
I think there's also an evolutionary drive behind it, especially when horror started getting big again after 9/11, and people had this whole fear of being kidnapped by foreigners or being killed by your neighbor, because these things were happening in the real world.
Yeah.
It's our drive, whether we sort of consciously realize it or not, to be as safe as we can and to know our enemy and to try to figure out how to deal with situations like that. And I think that feeds directly into the zombie genre, because even though zombies aren't real, a lot of what happens in those stories is real, or could potentially be real, in terms of sickness, lawlessness, loss of government, just warring with other people, people killing you to take your resources, stuff like that. And there's an appeal with that as well, which is kind of a game theory thing, where you like to play that game in your head, and that's really where the water cooler comes in. Mm-hmm. And you say, oh shit, man, did you see The Walking Dead last night? What would you have done? Like, would you have stayed at Herschel's farm and tried to board it up, or would you have just taken off?
Or could you shoot your sister in the head if she came back from the dead? Like,
yeah, well, would you stick around and grab supplies? And everyone has their own idea of how they would do it. And when I've been interviewed about zombie stuff, and I'm sure this has happened to you guys as well, that question comes up sometimes, and they're like, what would you do? And like, well, I had a condo that was 5 floors up, so it had pretty good sight lines, and I'm from Alberta, so I've shot before, so if I could get my hands on a gun, I think I'd be okay. But at the same time, I don't know if I want to stay in the city, because we all know that doesn't play out very well.
Yeah.
And so if it was like, I don't know, SARS, for example, you know from watching zombie movies that you shouldn't be in heavily populated areas, because that shit's just going to spread all over the place, and then before you know it, the Rolling Stones are playing.
In 2002, 2 very influential films came out, 28 Days Later and the movie adaptation of Resident Evil, and that threw zombies back into the modern vernacular. But that came right on the heels of SARS. It was something that could really resonate with people. It was the scenes of chaos and overrun hospitals and people attacking each other. I mean, that was like, that's grounded in reality, which is amazing. So
and crosses over into video games too, obviously. That
yeah.
You can't discount that.
For sure. I mean, Resident Evil obviously directly comes from video games. Incidentally, we traveled to Japan and interviewed the creator of Resident Evil, Shinji Mikami, who shed some light into the mechanics of the survival horror game genre and where he got his ideas from, not surprisingly from American movies. So it's a constant dialogue, it feeds itself.
But it's interesting because when the next section we're going to see, we're going to be talking about art, and we're going to be looking at some drawings from the 1700s. And we talk about this idea that the internet puts these violent images in front of us.
Right.
Yet when this was going on, people were hanged on the street. Like this kind of violence was maybe on a local level, you would see it live.
Yeah.
Obviously you wouldn't know what would happen in another city because the technology is not there. But clearly, in a way, people were used to violence, were used to these really dark images.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see if maybe someday now, because when we see the real thing, kind of squish, like, you know what I mean? We don't feel right looking at somebody being murdered.
Right.
Know?
Yeah.
But we have the replacement. At some point, actually, Rodrigo said, we used to kill people for fun, and now we make movies where people die for fun.
And
that's an evolution,
It's an evolution in the right direction.
It's an evolution in the right direction.
Yeah, it's true. We don't have the same sort of like streets full of like diseased people, choking on their own pus or. That's gross. But public executions. I mean, we might not have that, but that does occur in the world still. Not surprisingly, places that have banned horror, where it's not legal to screen horror, are all the same places where that have horrendous human rights violation records. So perhaps now we've insulated ourselves enough that that we forgot what that's like, and sort of as the gruesome images came back from all kinds of places, maybe we're getting in touch with our violent roots. I have no
You mentioned something really interesting there that ties into a book called The Lust for Blood by a guy named Jeffrey A. Kotler. And he talks about why we're so bloodthirsty and why we like this stuff. And there's a ton of reasons, hence him writing a whole book about it. But one of the things he mentioned that's really interesting is that we've evolved in some ways much quicker than we have other ways. So for example, our technology has leapt light years. And so we have, we can make tons of horror movies cheaply now. And we can make things look really realistic and really violent and bloody. And so we use that to feed into our, that sort of animal side of us that we needed back in the day. Kill or be killed. We're here because our ancestors were more bloodthirsty than the other tribe. And that hasn't been, we haven't evolved away from that. That hasn't been bred out of us over time enough, so we still have those very violent impulses, and that's why sports are so popular, violent sports.
Mm-hmm. This is interesting because it brings the idea of the function of horror.
Right.
That's the idea, and one of the things we talk about is this idea of moral instruction.
Yeah.
To the idea of saying if you do something wrong, you will be punished, and the idea that they were in pubs and bars and whatever. And so everybody, mainly the common people in this case, will be looking at this. And this is 200 years after the church had that whole power,
Yeah.
But it still goes back to horror having plenty of functions. But at this point, it's still not pure entertainment. There's
Right.
something more.
Yeah, and even in the realm of pure entertainment, there's always something that indicates good versus evil. The audience knows what's good, and the audience knows what's evil. And even if the directors and the filmmakers try to sort of play with those ideas a little bit, there's a moral thing at work there. And what's interesting about the 4 Stages of Cruelty is it's almost like an early horror comic book. And if you've ever read any of the old horror comics, it's always like a payback story. It's always like a revenge story. It's not just bad things happening for no reason. It's always somebody who's greedy or who's committed some form of sin or another, and they think they're going to get away from it. And then from out of the swamp, here comes this guy to take back his gold or whatever the hell. And there's always a moral standpoint in horror. It's never. It might be loose and it might be kind of off center sometimes, but there's almost always a line between good versus evil in these things, and that's important to know, because when someone asks you how can you look at this stuff, you're never like, I don't know, it's hard to explain really.
There's a lot more depth that people that are not used to looking at it, because
right.
we always, one of the things we notice from the get-go is horror is super easy to disregard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Definitely some people complain about the quality of the movies or, you know, the easy scare or like the blood or whatever it is. But definitely if you want to attack it, there's a lot of places and there are a lot of ways that you can go at. But they fail to see that there's a lot more going on.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot deeper than that.
I mean, originally the delineation of good versus evil was very clear. In all the art, there's hell and there's demons and then there's God and angels. And, you know, as we've evolved, you know, monsters became sympathetic. They're not necessarily good and they still need to be destroyed, but, you know, they're sympathetic. And then Hitchcock came along and really introduced the idea of the human monster with Psycho and then it's kind of the boy next door. But he's not just evil, he's sick.
Right.
And then you've got that kind of thing. And this just keeps kind of going forward. Zombies are, you know, they're not evil and there's something compelling about that. They're more like animals just acting on, you know, hunger imperative. And then, you know, filmmakers and storytellers are then, you know, kind of flipping it and the zombies are starring in movies and they're being romantic.
If you've ever defended your love for horror, and I'm sure everyone in this room has, definitely everyone on the stage has, you know that it's kind of murky to explain what it is you love about it and why it makes you feel good, but it does.
And not only that, I mean, we look at cultural interpretations of horror, our own cultures, and it's like, it's dangerous and it's harmful and stuff like that. And you gotta understand that horror kind of did that to itself. I mean, guys like William Castle, no pregnant people allowed, you must take out a life insurance policy, this movie will ruin your brain for the rest of your life. Like it's, I mean, we've used it, horror filmmakers and distributors and producers have used the danger of horror that doesn't exist as a very powerful marketing tool. We dare you to watch this. We dare you because what's gonna happen? Am I gonna die? Am I gonna have a heart attack? There's a rumor in my family that my great-grandmother's cousin had a miscarriage during a screening of Frankenstein. So, who knows, man? Maybe it's really bad for you. Maybe it's dangerous. Maybe you're grilling your brains every time you watch horror movies. Maybe you're shortening your life.
But of course the media likes to mention when a serial killer is caught, or say like someone goes in and shoots up their classmates. You know, they talk about the horror movies and the horror books that they had on their shelves, and this guy read Stephen King, and so that must be why he shot up his classmates. You know, I'm sure they fail to mention the fucking shelf of Harry Potter books that he might just well have read, right? Like nobody just only consumes horror, but...
Or the shelf of Zoloft he has in his bathroom. Yeah, that always comes out 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, there were other things at play here.
Yeah,
Not just him watching Freddy movies.
Yeah, the shelf of like no parental attention for most of their life.
Yeah, or like, you know, all kinds of things that, you know, make people get up and do bad stuff. Yeah. There's never at any point in history, and I don't think there ever will be, of a case of a horror movie making somebody get up and do something bad. Now, you know, depends on how you want to look at it, though. You know, if you want to go after horror movies as a source of violence and trouble in the world, and you get rid of them all, chances are you're not going to get rid of all the violence in the world.
And it's this idea that, you know, we have an anxiety. We know we are going to die. And it's like, if you die, why do you do anything? And
what's the point?
What's the point? And horror definitely provides. It's a catharsis and other things. But I would better let the experts talk.
Yeah, and we'll let the experts talk, but I'll just say this, that we're given all kinds of reasons by all kinds of people, not reasons, but explanations of what happens after we die. And I think horror fans generally reject these things, and I think that's a big reason of what pulls us to watching this stuff, is because we don't like all the stuff that we've been told. We don't believe that necessarily that their version of the afterlife that we've been fed is necessarily the one that happens, or to accept the very, very natural process of life and its end, then you possibly are leading a more authentic existence. That to me, that's the line of the movie to me. What, you know, we do this stuff because we choose not to ignore our emotions. We choose not to pretend that our spirit is going to fly away with little wings and start playing harps and shit.
One thing that you guys should definitely do, take out your phones and Google TED Talks, TED Talks, and the 4 stories we tell ourselves about death. It's one of the most amazing TED Talks, and it discusses, there are 4 different stories that we all are sold and sell ourselves on so we can help deal with our anxieties of death, and it goes perfectly with what's in the film. Thank you for having me on the panel. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the show. See you.
Get out of here. So that's it. So after that, we went to Mexico and we spoke to people about the Day of the Dead, which is actually an agricultural festival more than anything, because we die, we put in the ground, and the corn grows. So it's the cycle of life, and it actually, our deaths help feed the next generation.
And there's a reality, which is we are all gonna die. And the question is, okay, how do you deal with that situation? And I think the idea, like there's 2 concepts for me that are really important. Number 1 is the concept of community. And this is exactly why we are showing the zombie walk, because in the end the zombie walk and the people who dress up and, you know, the fans, I think they are becoming a community. They are becoming a group of people who is like, okay, you know what, this gives sense to my life, and there's a bunch of us that actually enjoy this together. So it's beyond the death that is coming, obviously, is let's enjoy this moment.
Right.
The second part is that when you confront death by actually looking at it, by actually looking at these movies, you know, again, you prepare yourself. Of course it's going to be painful. It's painful for everybody, you know. I don't think anybody's going to be happy about this situation. But it's important to have a feel for it and to not close your eyes and expect it's not going to happen, but to just say, you know what, it will, but there's a lot more to live before.
That's right, and then you sort of come to terms with that, and then you move on. You live your life.
Right.
There's no sense in living life fearing death. There's no sense to it. There's no reason for it. As natural of an instinct as that may be.
I actually believe that our culture represses death and just squashes it down into the deepest barrel they can find. But one of the things I love about horror isn't just that it makes you confront death, is that it makes you confront life in really meaningful ways, which I think you were touching on. But I think for the most part, we are so busy just surviving our modern existence that we don't actually stop and critique things like capitalism. We don't talk about that anymore. Marx did that, and capitalism won, and so we're gonna keep going. And the same with patriarchy, the same with racism, the same with a lot of really horrible evil that we've learned to live with. I feel like horror really offers us the opportunity to engage with that, and it's almost darker than engaging with death.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily offer you answers, but it doesn't claim to. It gives you a place to sort of process your own thoughts in that thing, which is cool. I mean, it's like, it's very pop culture, but it's also like, I mean, it might be pop culture, but, you know, we live it every day, right? There's more to it, I think, than just the buzz of entertainment.